Are you interested in knowing your young child in a whole new way? Understanding what's really going on in their developing mind? Does your child say or do things that make you stop and wonder, where did that come from? Well, stick around because this podcast is designed for you. Hello, friends, and welcome, listeners. I'm Dr. Kimberly Bell, the Clinical Director of the Hannah Perkins Center for Child Development in Cleveland, Ohio. And this is The Hidden Language of Children, a podcast dedicated to the understanding of children we love and helping them grow. We created this podcast to help parents and caregivers understand the inner life of children, that constant churning of feelings and emotions that goes on inside of us. This is the work Hannah Perkins has been doing with children and families since 1951. We help kids become the boss of themselves. We work with children who have everyday developmental struggles, like trouble listening to directions or making friends. We also work with kids who are dealing with big stuff. Their parents are getting divorced, or someone in the family has a serious illness and is in and out of the hospital. And we work with grown-ups who have questions as a parent and want to gain comfort and confidence in that role. And we want to share it with you because our approach to understanding children reduces conflict and makes life better for everyone. Today, I'm welcoming child psychoanalyst Barbara Streeter, who has been a part of Hannah Perkins for longer than anyone else. Barbara has been an early childhood teacher, the director of our school, and now serves as a consulting therapist working with children, families, and teachers. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, Kim.
How are you doing today?
I'm delighted to be here. I love to talk about kids.
All right, so today our topic is behavior as communication. I think that's the foundation of what this podcast is based on, and you're the perfect person to talk to us about it. So why don't we start by talking about what is meant by behavior as communication?
Behavior is a communication of feelings that need to be understood in simple terms. And it's very easy to understand when you think about a baby. A baby cries, you know it's communicating that it needs something. And if you know the baby well, you know how to figure out what it needs. And a toddler hits, and you know it's communicating something. It's usually an angry feeling, and you say, no hitting, say you're mad, or use your words. And that's where it all starts, is helping children identify what they are trying to communicate through their behaviors. Sounds simple. It's much more complicated.
So it isn't just that when children start to be able to talk, we can kind of relax because they're going to eventually figure out how to talk about their feelings. This is something that we need to help them with.
That's the complicated part. When you hit the age of 3, and even with toddlers, these feelings are getting big and happening in all sorts of ways. The child is growing, the child is developing ideas inside their head about their experiences. The child is developing cognitive abilities, but doesn't have the same cognitive abilities we have. So, for instance, a young child doesn't have a sense of time. So you say, I'm going away, I'll be back shortly, or I'll be back in an hour. That has no meaning for the child. You're gone, and they get really upset. And so what they're trying to communicate when they're crying and clinging to you is not just, I don't want you to go. It's, I'm really scared that you're going to be leaving and gone and not come back. And so you don't always know exactly what the child's feeling, and you have to work together with the child to understand it and then give the words for the feeling. And it takes practice for the child to recognize that when mommy says for an hour, it means something like it won't be forever.
Right. For a child who has no sense of time.
Right.
So if a parent is interested in doing this, like, why is it important for the child? Like, what is being able to verbalize feelings? Why is that important? What does that give the child?
Well, you have to imagine how it is for you with your big feelings. Suppose you're starting a new job and you don't know anybody. You're not sure you're going to perform well. You don't know where to get the extra paper. You may not even be sure exactly where your office is going to be. And that produces a lot of big feelings. And you know, because you're grown up and you've had a lot of experience, that there will be somebody who speaks your language and will help you figure it out, and that nobody expects you to know everything from the start. A child doesn't know any of these things when they start preschool. And so they're entering a world that produces a lot of anxiety, and they have to handle this anxiety some way. And it can come out in all sorts of ways. If they don't know all the things I just described that you as an adult know, they have very few resources to manage this new place, and they don't know what's happening to them. And that's when you can get a child who runs through the room and grabs toys, or who climbs on tables and you don't know why he's doing it. And it might be that he's just driven by anxiety. He hasn't learned yet all the many things he needs to learn to manage the situation. So you can help from the outside, but if the child knows ahead of time, I'm going to this place and I'm worried and I'm anxious and mommy can help me with my feelings, then the behavior calms down and the child can take it a step at a time.
So just like us, if we're having a feeling we haven't quite figured out why, we're running around just feeling some sort of anxiety or some sort of anger, it helps us to be able to put that into words and say, oh, that's why I'm upset, and be able to talk to somebody about it. So that doesn't come naturally. Parents have to help children develop that.
You said that very well.
All right, great. So as a parent or a teacher, because I heard you mention school, we know these things don't happen just at school or just at home with kids. How do you think about approaching a child so that they can understand their behavior means more than what it might seem?
There's so many ways. You have to read the cues from the child as to what the child might be experiencing. But the first thing is, when you say, don't do that, whatever they might be doing, or you need to sit down, you are helping the child know something, but you're not helping the child feel less anxious. So the first thing that is helpful to say is, this school is safe. We will keep you safe. And if mommy's there, mommy has decided this is a safe school. And then, can I show you where your cubby is? Or something that helps orient the child, but that lets the child know that you recognize that they don't feel safe and that they want somebody to help them out.
So if your child is acting up and you say, I need you to stop that, but you don't really uncover what's underneath it, then you might get some other kind of behavior. So is there a different thing to say other than stop it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Suppose you have a child who's sitting at the table with you and some guests at dinner time, and all of a sudden the child crawls up on the top of the table, and you're embarrassed, and you don't know why your child's doing it, and you say, you need to get down. Well, that's an okay thing to say, but it doesn't help understand why the child was doing that. And that means it's feeling to the child like a command as opposed to something that helps them. And if you noticed that just at the time this child stood on the table, the baby brother woke up and all the people at the table were focusing on this little darling baby, that maybe the child got up on the table because he or she felt left out, not noticed, not good enough. And you could say, we're noticing you too, but I think you can get noticed by asking for your turn to talk. You don't need to climb up on the table. And in so doing, you're empathizing with the child and you're putting their feelings into words. You want to get noticed. You've noticed your little brother. And eventually it can be, are you feeling jealous again? Or are you feeling left out again? Or something to that effect. Now, play it out over time, and you can find out from your child why it's so hard to wait for his turn to get noticed. And it might be that those jealous feelings are impacted by inside ideas the child has, meaning a child's constantly thinking, constantly trying to figure out how to get control over his world. So and
that leads,
you want to stop me?
I stop you because that leads me right into, I think, our next question. Because I know here at Hannah Perkins, we talk a lot about the inner life of children, that we focus on the inner life of children. And I think you're starting to talk about exactly what that is. So explain that a little bit more. What exactly are we talking about when we say the inner life of children?
When you talk about behaviors are communications of feelings that need to be understood, it's very easy to think of what I described before. He's mad, he's sad, we can label it, he can say it. And the fact is that internally, the child isn't just mad, isn't just sad. They've got ideas attached to why there's a mad or what will happen if they have the mad and what will, and then they've got, an example is if I say I'm mad at mommy, will she get mad back at me? Will she, will I be hurting her feelings? So they've got both those ideas. But also, they've got ideas like, why did she go have a baby? Was there something wrong with me that she didn't like? And the reason they get these ideas is because they don't want to be helpless, a passive, person who has to just accept what happens in the world. They don't like it, so they want to figure out how to change it. And it's better to think I can change it than it's just what's always going to be. So they think, well, what did I do that made her want another child? Was there something wrong with me? Can I change that? And so all this is going on in their heads. And so when it gets talked about and mother can say, that's not true at all. I love you just as much. And I wanted another child. Some mothers have said, I wanted another child because I loved you so much. I wanted two children. And this can really help the child with his self-identity and his self-esteem. I think there's lots of us growing up who have grown up thinking, mother always liked the others better, or I just was never as good as my siblings, because it never got discussed and never got understood. And so that's one reason why it's so important to be aware of the inner life, and one reason why it's so complicated to help children sort out their feelings.
Well, and I imagine it helps the self-esteem of the parent who is seeing this complex little creature that they're helping to put out into the world and being so confused or feeling like you can't quite get a handle on why your kids are behaving the way they're behaving. There must be a sense of satisfaction and power, empowerment in being able to find a way in to understand what your toddler is trying to communicate, what your preschooler is trying to communicate, what your teenager is trying to communicate, right? This goes through the developmental spectrum.
Absolutely.
So, Barbara, can you give us another example of how we might work with this inner life of a child?
Well, this example is even more complicated in that it illustrates how sometimes children have experiences early in their life and the grown-ups don't notice what their experience was. And it comes out later in behaviors that are disconnected from the early experience. And we at Hannah Perkins have seen situations where children have, for instance, had medical procedures that have frightened them and have involved being held down and, poked with needles. And these experiences are particularly impactful to little kids. And often, if you're like in a toddler phase, and we haven't even talked about the phases and the preoccupations of different phases, but toddlers are very busy struggling with big aggressive impulses and big loving impulses, but they're not helping each other out. When it's aggression, it's raw aggression. And so they experience the medical procedures as raw aggression directed at them. And so that complicates the picture, their own inside development and feelings. And it can actually be traumatic, but because the parents are busy trying to help and do what the doctors say and worry, they recognize the child's upset, but they don't quite recognize how the child internalizes that experience. And that means how that experience becomes part of their inner life. And we had one child who manifested the problem when he entered preschool, because he walked into the classroom and started barreling through the classroom, and he wouldn't sit down for group times. And he, when restrained from running around, would then kick the teachers. And actually, when he got really worked up and they had to really hold him, he started to throw chairs. And this was very frightening for the teaching staff as well as the kids, and for the mom, who really didn't know why he was behaving this way. And this required extra intervention, because a mom can't just figure this out on her own, nor can a teacher. And the consultant who was working with a mom in this kind of situation was able to piece back together with her that there had been this experience, and encourage her to talk to her child about it. And when the experience, you can't just say, oh, you had this experience, it must be why you're upset. You have to go back and find out if the child can have what we call a feeling memory of the experience, and piece it together that was very frightening. But school isn't the same. It's not going to be a place where people do things to you, where bad things happen. And the teachers even could at least accept from mom that she's talking to her child about this and say, this is a safe place. Nobody hurts anybody here. Nobody holds anybody down. And with that kind of work, the child is then able to sort out what's going on in his inner life and have a new perspective on school. And he managed better after that.
And I think it makes me think about how many parents have to have their child go through a medical procedure, and how frightening it is for them, and how much worry there is about, well, this is the best thing for my child, but this is going to somehow upset my child, or will it damage my child? And it brings me back to sort of one of my favorite Hannah Perkins-ese kind of mantras is, a child can get through anything that can be talked about. And
absolutely.
And it sounds like,
I like that too.
That's kind of the point we're getting to, is that whether it is being jealous of a sibling, or being upset that mom and dad are going out and leaving them with a babysitter, or starting a new school, or something as serious as hospitalization, that if you can understand a child's reaction to those things and help them put it into words instead of behavior, then that experience can be integrated, and the problem can be solved.
I like to say that reality is always better than fantasy in that regard. And children have all sorts of fantasies about why things happen. And if they're fed the reality in the doses that are just right for them at the right level, in a way that makes sense to them, and if they are helped to know what to expect in the next situation, they will feel so much safer with themselves and with the world, so much more competent. And if they get to know their feelings internally, they will have better self-regulation skills.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, this was a lot today. I hope everybody has enjoyed hearing this piece from Barbara. And we want to move on. We have another section of our podcast that we're going to do each time called Let's Rephrase It. Here at Hannah Perkins, we often have parents tell us that they enjoy the way that we talk to children, that our language is unique in the way that we talk to children. So we're going to talk about rephrasing it. So the first one we want to talk about is how we talk about toilet training, because we don't use the word toilet training. Barbara, what is the word that we use?
Toilet mastery.
So why do we want to rephrase it from toilet training to toilet mastery?
Toilet training is when the adult trains the child. So the child's not doing it for himself. The child's doing it to please the adult or to get the rewards that might be offered. Toilet mastery is that the child is getting to know his body and getting control over his body and being able to make choices about what to do with his body. And that builds self-esteem, and that builds empowerment. As things go, toilet mastery is a long process. And most all developmental steps entail a process that goes back and forth. And that's certainly what toilet mastery entails.
And then also keeping clean and dry with the entirety of your body, not just with going to the potty. And learning to take care of yourself and value that for yourself.
And it's choosing to do what is socially appropriate. And being able to make the choice is what's all the difference. And the same thing goes with eating, if I can throw that one in, to be able to choose what you put into your mouth as opposed to being, cajoled or, forced into eating what mother thinks is the good thing for you. I'm not saying you shouldn't make sure your child has good nutrition, but the point is allow them to have a choice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's another one. So whenever our child does something that we want them to continue doing, it's the easiest thing is to say, "Good job. I am so proud of you." In Hannah Perkinsese, we say,
"That must make you feel so proud." Yeah. And I have to give Debbie Paris credit for, Debbie Paris is one of our colleagues, and she was the one who said, self-esteem comes from the self. And motivation to learn, motivation to achieve, motivation to do the right thing really should be coming from the self so that the child can feel proud. When it's done for somebody else, it's always a chore.
So in every episode, that was fun. That's my favorite part, I think, of Hannah Perkins is the way that we speak to children is different and I think empowering in a lot of different ways. So the next section that we're going to have every episode is we're going to take questions. So if anybody that's out there listening, if you want to submit a question to us, you can do so on our YouTube channel. And we have a question for today. Today's question comes from Cleveland. A mother says she's embarrassed at playdates when her 4-year-old son won't share his toys. He'll be playing with one toy, and the moment the other child picks up a different toy, then that's the one he suddenly wants to play with. She asks, how can she get him to share?
Well, the first step is to acknowledge that it's very understandable that he doesn't want some other child to be playing with his toys. It's a new experience, probably, or newish, and they're his toys, and that's important. The second step is to give him some opportunity to discuss ahead of time what he thinks he might be able to share and what he really doesn't want another child to touch. Children have favorite toys, and it's upsetting if somebody else is playing with it. So mother says, let's put all those toys that you don't want to share away. Because when your friend comes over, he should be able to choose. You know how good it feels to choose what he wants to play with. And then if he is playing with something that you want to play with too, you can either ask him if you can play together, or you can ask him if you can play with it after he's finished.
It's very considerate, I think, of the child, and also this idea that it's important to be someone who shares, but it's also okay to have special things that you don't want to share, that that's a normal human experience, and that kids shouldn't have to share everything.
Actually, in our preschool, children are allowed to say no, and that's to be accepted by the other children when they ask to play with whatever the first child is playing with. And that's somewhat unusual. I think parents want their children to show up well, and they want them to share in all circumstances. And it's really unfair to the child, because if they're allowed to say no and have that feeling, they're much more likely in the future to want to share again from the self, as opposed to because somebody on the outside is making you do it.
This was a lot of amazing information, Barbara, and we obviously can't go into everything in one episode, which is why we're going to have a podcast series. So I can't wait for you to come back so we can talk about more things. But if people,
I'd be happy
if
to.
people want to know more right now, we do have a book called that's the ultimate guide to understanding your child's behavior. It is called Timeless Advice for Parents of Young Children. And this book was written by a group of Hannah Perkins early childhood development experts. And we're going to put a QR code up on the screen and a picture here of the book. And you can scan that to find it on Amazon for less than $20. From tantrums to preschool jitters, it unlocks the mysteries of your child's mind. It's easy reading with short chapters that are organized by common situations, and it offers gentle and loving strategies for so many challenges that parents face in the way that Barbara and I have been talking about them today. Timeless advice can bring out that nurturing, patient, and resourceful parent that lives in all of us. Plus, every purchase supports the nonprofit Hannah Perkins Center. You can find it at Amazon.com. All right, that's our time for today. If you'd like us to answer questions about your child's behavior, send us an email at hiddenlanguageofchildren@gmail.com or visit our website at hiddenlanguageofchildren.org. Thank you for joining us. We're grateful to all of our listeners today. We hope you enjoy this conversation and found it to be helpful when making parenting decisions appropriate for your child. The Hidden Language of Children podcast is a production of the nonprofit Hannah Perkins Center for Child Development in beautiful Shaker Heights, Ohio. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe to hear future episodes. Share it with your friends and family, and we welcome your comments and questions in the comment section of our YouTube video. Again, you can contact us at hiddenlanguageofchildren@gmail.com. For more links and information about our approach to healthy child development, visit our website at hiddenlanguageofchildren.org. I'm Dr. Kimberly Bell, and we will see you next time.